I'll go ahead and welcome everyone to our workshop today, Use Excel for Data Visuals. Today's event is sponsored by American University's Measurement and Evaluation Program. At American University, we are committed to pursuing inclusive excellence. One of our practices, shared from our Indigenous and Native communities, is to offer a land acknowledgement at the beginning of our meetings and events. The goal is to build our mindfulness of the historical processes in which we still participate. American University is founded on the unceded land of the Nacotchtank, Anacostan, and Piscataway peoples. I ask you to join me in acknowledging these communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. American University also acknowledges that it was founded upon exclusions and erasures of many Indigenous peoples, including those on whose land this institution is located. With this acknowledgement, we commit to working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. Those of you who attend our events regularly know that we always provide a land acknowledgement. I would encourage those of you present today to take this a step further. And if you're in the US or Canada or Australia, you can do some research on the land where you are sitting if you're not aware of the history of the land. I'm going to put a link in the chat for the code for Anchorage and the Native Land Digital site, which from Canada and Alaska, and those will give you some resources where you can look up the land where you are to learn more about its history. As we get started today, I would like to introduce you to our student team that is overseeing today's workshop. Our moderators are all students in our Masters of Measurement and Evaluation program. Anna Poole will be our Zoom moderator. She will be introducing our speaker and fielding any questions on Zoom. Michelle Flores is our Facebook live stream moderator, who will let us know if any questions arise on Facebook. And Shelley Golson-Mickens will wrap up the session at the end and give us a summary of what we have learned today. Shelley's having some issues logging on, but I will pop off myself and go help her and come back. So I'm going to give it to Anna. Take it away.
Before we get started today, I'd love to hear where you're joining us from. If you've not yet put it in the chat, perhaps you can add in the chat where you're joining us from, and I will read it out. Earlier, we had people from Uganda, Kenya, Ghana, Bethesda, Maryland, Puerto Rico, Madagascar, Virginia, Greensboro, North Carolina. I see Washington, D.C., St. Louis, Missouri, El Salvador, Ukraine, Florida, Cameroon, the UK. Excellent, great. Michelle, do we have anyone on the Facebook feed?
Hi, yeah, currently I don't see the stream being presented live on Facebook.
I just put it through, so it should be starting in the next couple of minutes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll let you know if any questions pop up.
Great. Well, welcome again, and thank you for joining us for our workshop. We're glad to see we have people joining us from all over the world. Our speaker today is Dennis Hood. Dennis Hood is president of Equa Solutions, a boutique consulting firm located in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. He has 18 years of consulting experience performing evaluation, proposal management, and business development. During his career, he has partnered with government, nonprofit, and commercial clients across a broad range of sectors, including healthcare, engineering, construction, aviation, education, agriculture, infrastructure, and environmental protection, among others. He holds an MS in Measurement and Evaluation from American University, as well as an MA in International Relations from the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. Thank you for leading our workshop today. Dennis, on to you.
Well, thank you, Anna, for that introduction, and thank you to American University for hosting this event and inviting me to speak with everybody. and to everybody who is joining in from all over the US and all over the world, it sounds like. I appreciate you taking the time to join this this afternoon, morning, evening, whatever time of day it might be for you. Hopefully everybody can see my my screen here. I will go ahead and dive into just a quick agenda for what I'd like to go over today. First, I'll just do a few PowerPoint presentations here, just kind of go over a few items, an introduction to myself, an introduction to this workshop. We'll go over some high-level types of visualizations that you can make in Excel. I'll offer a few pro tips that I've picked up along the route of my career. And then I wanted to touch on a few other items, including accessibility, and then some helpful resources that I think will really be helpful to you to refer to take your data visualization to the next level, especially when you're using Excel. And then after just a few minutes of presentation, we'll dive into the actual spreadsheet and show how we produce some of these helpful data visualization tools. So just a quick introduction about me. Who's this guy talking to all of you this afternoon? Again, my name is Dennis Hood. I am originally from Salt Lake City, Utah. I currently reside in Germantown, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. I originally studied history at the University of Utah, so I have a bit of a humanities background, but I made my way to Washington, D.C. and studied international relations and economics, and finally made my way to American University and the measurement and evaluation program a bit later on. I started my little consulting company, Equa Solutions. You can see it's the cute little logo here, back in 2009. So in June, I'll be marking 14 years of company operations, which I'm proud of. We're a small company. We're anywhere from just a few of us to up to about half dozen at any point. So we're small but mighty. But we do a couple different types of work, including proposal management, primarily for federal contractors. We've worked with clients all over the US, primarily small, medium companies, doing anything and everything ranging from construction to special forces operations training and international peacekeeping. We've been really fortunate to work with some unique clients, and they have a lot of unique data visualizations that go into these proposals that we put together, anything from an org chart and a flow graphic all the way to bar charts and other helpful visuals. But maybe more relevant to some of the people joining on this call, we also do some evaluation consulting as well, primarily mixed methods and qualitative approaches. I've been really fortunate to work with some really unique mission-oriented organizations focused on youth education, healthcare. Currently, I'm doing a project related to conservation agriculture in the Midwest. So it's always fun to learn. But throughout my career in my education, my passion has really been focused on helping clients develop practical solutions that allows them to tell really unique stories. A colleague of mine refers to me as a scope sucker. I'm a sucker for a good scope of work, and she's really not wrong. I love helping clients tell their unique stories, whether that's a unique historical context, how they overcome unique challenges, how they develop a novel approach to their mission, or anything else. So that's just a little bit about me. A little bit about this presentation, what we'll be going over in the next half hour to an hour here. Many of you attending are really focused on gathering, analyzing, collecting, and reporting your data to a wide range of audiences, particularly evaluation stakeholders, funders, your internal chains of command, and others. So what I hope for this workshop is that provide some ideas for how you can tell your organizations or your clients or your stakeholders unique stories and call out some unique accomplishments, challenges, approaches, whatever story it is that you're trying to tell. I also understand that a lot of you will probably have a lot of unique constraints. You're busy, you don't have enough time and funding to do everything that you need to do. So I found that Microsoft Excel is a fairly accessible and relatively affordable resource compared to many other types of data visualization tools. It can be used to quickly and cheaply produce helpful data visualizations that can help you tell those stories. So this presentation is going to provide a basic overview of some of the more straightforward graphs, charts, and tools that you can produce in Excel. That's the purpose here. I'm going to go over some of the tools you can use and when you should consider using those tools. We'll provide some specific examples as well. After that, I'd like to share some helpful tips to take those visualizations from the default options that Excel provides, which aren't necessarily bad, but really help you take them to the next level. I want to emphasize first off that this workshop is for newcomers and beginners to Excel and to the world of data visualization. If you're looking for expert level tips or coding practices, first off, I tip my hat to you, and I certainly appreciate your expertise, but this workshop probably won't be for you. So just a little bit of a disclaimer on that before we dive in. So I'd like to start off with going over some of the types of visualizations that you can make. Before I dive in too far, I want to emphasize that it's critical for everybody to be mindful of your data when you select the type of visualization you want to make in Excel. The type of data and the amount of data that you have really is going to be helpful in deciding what type of chart you use, as we'll discuss for the next few minutes. And as you can see here, we'll start off with pie charts. Now, I'm mindful that when we advertised this webinar, one of the first lines in the description was not another pie chart. But I think it's helpful to note that our friend, the pie chart, does have a time and a place where it can be appropriate and helpful, particularly when you have a relatively small amount of data or a small amount of categories that you want to show. Now, when you want to present data that comprise the parts of a whole, a pie chart can really be helpful. That is, when you have different pieces of data that, when taken together, contribute to a total. For example, with a population of a city or a county, you have a predefined total. You have a city, for example, could have a population of 100,000. So when you use a pie chart, you could present different demographic subsets of that population, such as age groups that, when they total up together, would add up to 100,000. In that case, you might have an age group that's, say, for 0 to 17 years of age, 18 to 39, 45 to 59, whatever categories you want. And then those together would then equal your populations. So it's really contributions to a total. There's a lot of other times you can use a pie chart. We mentioned demographics, line items in a budget, what percent of sales come from different sources of revenue, et cetera, et cetera. There's quite a few options that you could choose from, and it really kind of depends on your organization and what you're trying to portray. One note that I'd like to note here is more of a disclaimer, is that I would recommend you use pie charts relatively sparingly in your data visualization tools. Particularly if you tend to have quite a few categories of data that comprise your total, you could end up with so many slices of pie that none of them really add meaning. It's just like overeating. You're going to have too many slices here. You don't want to do that. The whole purpose of data visualization is to quickly tell a story or a message. So it's generally, if you have more than around 5 or so categories of data, a pie chart is just going to become unwieldy. And in those cases, I would encourage you to consider other options, which we will explore here. The next type of visualization that we'll go over here and in our demonstration a little bit later on are our friends, the bar charts. These are a little bit more of a sophisticated way of displaying categorical data. They allow you to take the next steps beyond pie charts and to show larger quantities of data. These can generally be presented either horizontally or vertically, which we'll go over into some detail in a little bit more in a minute. There are a few things to consider when deciding if you think your data should be visualized using a bar chart. First, the data should tend to fit into discrete categories. For example, you could look at the number of students enrolled in different programs at school, number of patients who take specific forms of medication, the quantities of different types of crime in a location. The options are pretty endless. It's important to point out that generally the categories should be independent from one another. And you could also use a bar chart to show changes over time. Some examples might be the number of individuals who participate in a program each month of a year, annual crop production from one quarter to another, sales per year, so on and so on. And a little bit later on in this presentation, I'll talk about another situation where you could show changes over time as well. I would also like to just point out that bar charts can be a more visually powerful way to display situations where you have more categories of data, like we talked about a second ago. For example, in a situation where you might have 10 or more categories, a pie chart wouldn't really work very well, but your message could be more clearly conveyed with a bar chart. You can decide if your bar chart should be vertical or horizontal. That is, the bars or lines, like you can see here, can be either up or down or left to right. Horizontal bar charts, which are shown in the upper graphic here, are generally best for what are called nominal variables. Those are used to categorize particular attributes that can be measured. For example, the number of patients with a specific condition, preferences for flavors of salad dressings, responses on a survey, those can all be broken down into categories with specific quantities that are relatively comparable. The vertical charts, like you can see at the bottom part here, are generally best more for ordinal data. There's a natural progression in your data and a sequence, and these tend to move from left to right. So the bars themselves become vertical. For example, there could be ages, incomes, heights. These tend to increase. Ages increase from smallest to largest, as do incomes, heights. So those are situations where you would use those. There are also some different types of bar charts that you can produce in Excel, and I'll go into those more in a bit shortly, but those would include single bar charts and stacked bar charts. A stacked bar chart is a little different in that it's another helpful tool where you can show relationships between parts and wholes, much like pie charts did before. So, and there are several others that are a little bit more advanced, cluster bar charts and others, but we won't go into too much detail on those here. But some examples of bar charts that you could do. The single bar chart is the most commonly used, from my experience at least. Maybe some of you have other situations where you use different types of bar charts. But these, again, show different categories of data. You generally list your categories on one axis, and then you show your quantity on the other. And it's important to be mindful of things like the scale to make sure that your quantities are generally comparable. But then we also have a stacked bar chart, which can show parts of a whole, which can then be broken down into categories. So, for example, we have this example here. You could show the level of agreement with a particular statement. It's like, do you agree, somewhat agree, very much agree, with several different questions. And then, so in this example where it says category 1, 2, 3, 4, category 1 could, for example, be your first statement. And then you could then break out the level of agreement in the different colors. In this case, it's critical to have a clear legend next to your chart that indicates what each color represents. And I'll go into a little bit more on legends and labels in just a few minutes as well. Histograms are another helpful tool. They appear similar in bar charts in that they show the distribution of data in a horizontal or vertical fashion with bars or lines, like you can see here. But there are some important distinctions. Histograms are helpful when you have a larger data set generally, and you want to understand the frequency or densities of values within certain ranges. You can use these to visualize the distribution of continuous variables, identify outliers, compare distributions, and understand how the data is spread out. And there are lots of situations and examples where a histogram could be helpful. For example, you could show the distribution of age groups in a population, the distribution of test scores, product ratings, website traffic, and a lot of others. So that'll really depend on your particular data set and what you're trying to portray here. So another helpful tool is a scatter plot. Scatter plots are all about relationships between two variables, particularly continuous variables. That is, you can start from 0 and increase at regular intervals. These are helpful for showing patterns, positive or negative relationships, or no relationship at all, depending on what your data happens to say and what story you're trying to tell. And they can be used to visualize other statistical information that you can present in your evaluation reports or other documents, such as correlation data. I mentioned correlation data, but I'm not going to go into that much here. I'm definitely not a quant expert, so but scatter plots can be a helpful tool to help show those stories and help portray that data as well. Some examples could be the relationships between age and income. As you age, does income increase? Marketing budgets and sales revenue. If you spend more on marketing and tasks like that, does your sales revenue increase or does it decrease? Product prices and units sold. The options are pretty endless as well with these. And then one final type of chart I'd like to talk about are line charts, one of my favorites personally. Line charts are a very helpful tool to quickly show trends or changes over time. And that's the critical word for a line chart generally is time. The time component is the critical part. How does a variable change from one week to another, from one quarter, from one year to another? That really depends on the type of data that you're portraying. Line charts can also be useful to show trends for multiple variables on the same chart, such as this little graphic on this presentation shows. There are lots of examples when that can be useful. You could show test scores, mortality rates, temperatures, or other variables from one unit of time or another to the next. And then you could break that down even further. So I mentioned test scores, for example. You could show one line that represents the test schools of one school in a particular school district, and another line that shows the scores for a different school in the school district over time, over the same period of time. And that allows you to quickly display differences in performance and quick points of comparison and contrast for your audience to really help you tell that story. Is one, for example, are scores of one school going down while the other is going up? And you could quickly point out interesting trends of whatever your data tends to show. So as you may have noticed, there are some situations where more than one type of chart might be useful for the type of data you're trying to show. For example, a pie chart or a stacked bar chart could both show relationships between parts and totals. And you really need to choose between the types of visualization tools that you use based on the data that you have. There isn't always a perfect right or wrong chart to use. I encourage you to approach your data mindfully and decide what visualization is best for sharing your story and conveying your important message. This involves a bit of creativity on your part, as well as some thought about who your audience is. How busy are they? How much time do they have? Are they going to take the time to analyze every detail of your chart, or do you need to be able to quickly show one simple overarching message? And that's something that only you can decide based on the tools available to you. Now, I'm not going to be able to go into too much on this topic, but I did want to make a note on qualitative data. You know, a lot of what we've been talking about is really helpful for quantitative data, but I tend to do a lot of qualitative research myself, so I wanted to make sure that those of you who do this type of data can also use Excel. The first step whenever you want to use Excel for qualitative data is, of course, entering and coding your qualitative data, which is a whole separate topic and one that I can actually provide a helpful resource on, which I'll do in a little bit here. But once you have your qualitative data entered, there's quite a few different types of charts that you can then use. For example, you can make a frequency table that shows the quantity of times that certain words or themes or codes or other units are mentioned. And then you could turn that frequency table into other charts, bar charts, line charts, whatever it is that is helpful. Another tool that I've had quite a bit of luck with in the past on some of my qualitative projects have been developing theme maps or heat maps of qualitative data. I provided an example of that on this slide here. So basically, you build a table of the frequency of your qualitative data, and then you can color code those individual cells to graphically show topics or words or themes that are mentioned more than others. So for example, here, dark red would be things that were mentioned or instances that were presented fewer times. And then as it increases closer to yellow, orange, and then green, light green and dark green, that shows where and when certain topics are presented in greater frequency. So these can be helpful in getting you or your audiences to think about important themes and then dive into further analysis. You make timelines, Gantt charts, network maps, and other tools. And again, I'm not going to be demonstrating qualitative data visualization in Excel here, but I just wanted you to be aware of the possibilities that Excel has for helping you in your research and data presentation. So just a few quick pro tips and a couple other topics before we dive into the actual demonstration here. First, there are some powerful ways you can clean up your data in Excel, and especially in your visualizations. It's important to order your data. Your categories can be presented in specific orders, such as smallest to largest, largest to smallest, alphabetical. It doesn't always have to be in the default option that comes in your data set. There, you can clean things up with the grid lines. Sometimes too many grid lines can create a lot of noise that detracts from your audience's ability to get to the message, as they spend more time trying to process the graph itself rather than the message of the graph itself. Think about when grid lines are necessary and use them sparingly, just enough to make sure that your data and your story are clear. And then I would also encourage you to be mindful about using helpful legends, especially if you're showing multiple variables, and labeling your data. For example, sometimes you could add the quantities of categories at the end of a bar chart, or show percentages when it might not be clear. Other labels are helpful. Just make sure that your audience gets to the message of your data quickly. And that's all very possible in Excel. A few other points are on fonts and colors. The data in your visualization tools are there to tell your story. Think about ways that you can use color for that story. For example, if you want to cast attention to a specific category in a bar chart, you could make that bar or line a different color to bring that out compared to other categories. You can use gradients and other shades to show relationships and basically help draw your audience's eyes to certain pieces of information. Fonts are also very important. Microsoft Excel tends to churn things out using Calibri font, and that might be fine for some of you, but you don't have to use Calibri font. You can adjust it depending on your specific needs, and don't be afraid of changing your fonts. In many situations, you don't always, for example, have a lot of space for your charts. You might only have a small sheet in a report. And so you might have to find ways to use fonts to present information in a smaller way. So you consider using a condensed font in some cases, which tend to be narrower and smaller and take up less width than other fonts, such as Arial Narrow or some others. You could also think about serif fonts versus sans serif fonts. When I say serif font, those are the fonts that have the little feet on them. Think Times New Roman or some others. The fonts I have in this presentation are sans serif font. I tend to appreciate sans serif font more myself personally, but those are just a few things to consider in Excel as well. And then I also encourage you to think about branding and how your Excel visualizations are going to be used in your organization's branding. Your organization has a specific appearance for its visuals, and you can adjust your chart's colors, fonts, size to make sure that these visualizations are there to enhance your organization's mission. You don't want your visualizations to detract from your organization's other tools. And then just a quick note on figure titles. I think it's always important that a data visualization tool has a helpful figure title that's informative and generally has a descriptive caption. For example, the way I like to do it is shown here. I like to put a figure number, for example, figure X, 1, 2, 3, whatever that might be. And then a brief title, just a few words, maybe half a dozen or so words. And then maybe a more descriptive caption that explains your data a little bit more. So here's an example of how you could take a chart in Excel from a default appearance to more of a branded appearance. By the way, these charts are built based on totally made up data about staff composition at a hypothetical hospital. These are not real numbers. They're just for example and illustration purposes here. But the one on the left is the default that Excel generated. It's fine, you know, at least we've got a tool, but it doesn't tell that much of a story. So on the right, I made just a few tweaks to this chart. It took less than 3 minutes. I reduced the noise by taking off most of the grid lines, but I did add labels at the top of each of the bars to make the quantities clear. You can see the 53, the 41, the 37. Then I ordered the data from greatest to smallest, so at least we can see which categories have fewer or more quantities. And then I branded the colors to align with my company colors. For example, my Equa Solutions, our logo is lime green and dark blue. So I was able to quickly brand this visualization to match an Equa Solution branding appearance. I mean, of course, you could tweak that to whatever yours is, red, blue, purple, whatever that might be. And then I added a bit more of an informative title that helps the audience quickly understand the purpose and the message that I'm trying to convey. A story is being told here, and it was done in just a couple minutes in Excel, which I think is so helpful. I want to make an important note on accessibility. When you're using Microsoft Excel, there are definitely options for you to make your data accessible to people, to a wider range of audience. It's important to be mindful about color choices, for example. Be considerate of individuals who may have low vision or color blindness. It's helpful to choose colors with more of a contrast. Red and blue, for example, might contrast more than blue and violet. And then one other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people suffer from color blindness. In fact, red-green is probably the most common form of color blindness. So if you only have two variables showing a red and green next to each other, it might show an interesting story, but some people might have a hard time reading that. So just be mindful of that. And then a quick note on alt text. Alt text is a function in Excel that allows you to write a very brief description of an image that can then be read by screen reading software for individuals who might be visually impaired. It's a very easy function in Excel. I provided a little screenshot of where you can find it in Excel. After you've created a visual, you go in the Format tab, and then I've circled there's something called alt text, and then you simply write a 1 to 2 page description, and then the screen reading software can help those with may have low vision to really be able to access your visualization, and that just helps you tell your story to an even wider audience. So before we dive into the demonstration here, I wanted to just share a few other helpful resources. I want to emphasize there are a lot of people in this world who are a lot smarter than me. There are a lot of resources at American University, for example, as well as a lot of blogs that I follow that are very approachable and very fun. One of my favorites is listed here, the Evergreen Data Visualization blog. That's produced by an individual named Stephanie Evergreen. She is one of the gurus of data visualization, and I give her a shout out whenever I can. In fact, I've got her book right here next to me. In addition to her blog, she has a book here that I mentioned I'm not sure if you can actually see or not. I think it blurred it out, but it's called Effective Data Visualization, and it's such an accessible and helpful tool, and it's designed for people to use Excel as well. I can't recommend her enough. And then there are a few other blogs here, as well as some other AU webinars that have been conducted that are very helpful on data visualization. And one tool that I really want to point out is a webinar that was actually conducted just a few months ago on how to use Excel and Microsoft Word to analyze qualitative data. An individual named Seth Tucker, another alum from this program, conducted that webinar, and it was extraordinarily helpful. And I think that could be a very helpful companion to this particular presentation in terms of how you can use your Excel skills to really go to the next level with your stories. So next we'll be going on to a demonstration. We'll head to the spreadsheets in a moment here. When we get to this next portion, I'm going to show a demonstration of how to make one of each of the types of data visualizations that we went over. I want to show you where in Excel to find the right buttons to click, and to show you how quickly and easily you can create any one of these tools. Then I want to show how I apply some of those pro tips that I discussed to make your charts tell your stories in a more powerful way. I'm not going to do that for every one of the data visualizations that we produce, but I do want to be able to show it for one or two of them, just so you can see how we could take our data visualization from the default, which are fine, to that next level in helping you tell your story. So I'm going to quickly switch over to Excel here.
Dennis, if I can interrupt with some
Yes,
questions
please.
before you move on to the demonstration.
Yes.
Great. We have someone asking if you can please explain the difference between using a bar chart and when you should use a histogram.
Sure. Let me go back to those. Let me go back to those. So histogram is a slightly different type of data. It generally tends to be more of a continuous type of data, and you want to show more of a distribution of data. You want to be able to show situations where there might be central tendencies or outliers. For example, situations where you might want to create a bell chart in statistics. Generally showing a little bit more sophisticated data related to continuous data. There are situations where it's hard to tell the difference where a bar chart would be the most helpful and where a histogram would be the most helpful. I think generally a histogram would be helpful for when you have a larger data sets and it's more of a continuous set of data. I'm not sure if that answers the question very well, but generally it kind of depends on what type of data that you have. Somebody in the chat says that the total is 100%. I don't know that that's always. I don't know that that would always be true. I would probably need somebody with more of a statistics background. Honestly, I'm not a histogram expert. I'm going to tell you that right now. But generally, I think a couple of situations where histogram would be more helpful would be, your data is more continuous, and it's a larger data set. I don't know if that helps very much, but I'm probably not the best expert, the best expert at a histogram. I'm not sure if that answers that or not, but I might be able to get back to you on when some situations where one might be better than the other. I apologize if I'm not the right expert on that.
Okay, and we have another question. Similar to what you said about pie charts, is there a maximum recommended number of lines for a line chart?
I don't have a specific maximum number of lines in mind for a line chart. Again, I think it's going to depend on your data and what type of message you're trying to show. If you're going to have 100 lines, that's at that point it's going to become unwieldy. The whole point here is that you're able to show your story. I don't know where that cutoff point is, but I think you could definitely show 10 to 15 pretty easily. After that, I think it probably starts to get a little hard to show. At that point, I think it's just when a reader takes a look at 30, 40 lines on a chart, I think at that point, they're no longer able to realize what meaning you're trying to get across. It's too much. It might be helpful to do multiple line charts that are with fewer number of lines at that point, or to reconsider other situations. It really depends on your data. I don't think there's a specific right or wrong, though. It's just be mindful of what message you're trying to show. 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 10, 15, I think even would be fine, but just be mindful that you're trying to tell the story here. So. I don't know if that helps either, but were there any others, Anna? Or?
That was it so far, Dennis.
Okay.
Oh, hey, Dennis, I have one from Facebook Live.
Oh, sure. Hi, Michelle. Yes.
Yeah, it had to do with people who are like colorblind. So the question is, are there any particular color schemes or combinations you prefer, or any tools or resources you use to ensure color contrast and accessibility?
I think there are some resources. I'd have to find them online. Some resources that show, you can Google this, that there are some that show certain color combinations that are better for color blindness. I don't have it right in front of me, but there are some resources online. I can possibly check on that. I know I've seen that somewhere. I would just encourage you to think about colors that aren't necessarily close together. For example, Max, in the chat, orange and blue, for example, are a good color contrast. like I said, red and green are sometimes maybe a little bit of a dangerous combination just because some people have that particular color blindness. On the other hand, there is quite a bit of contrast between red and green. So, oh, and Julia, it looks like you presented a link here as well. Thank you for getting that before. I was trying to think of which ones I've seen. So I think Julia has presented, look at that, we're crowdsourcing answers right away. So thank you. I was not able to live Google that. I knew that these existed. So I would encourage you to check these resources for contrast and just be mindful as you make those selections. It's hard to make the right decision sometimes, especially if you have lots of different categories that you're trying to show. So, you can't always be perfect, but it's great if you can be as mindful as possible. We're all just trying to do the best to be as accessible as possible. So I think that's a great question. I'm glad you're thinking about that. Michelle or Anna, were there any others before I move to the spreadsheet?
Yeah, all set here.
Okay. Okay, Anna, could you tell me if you can see my Excel now? I've just pulled that up.
Yes, we can, Dennis.
Okay, wonderful. I was having some problems with sharing my screen a little bit ago. So as you can see along the bottom here, I've got several different tabs of data that we'll go over just a couple minutes per tab, just to kind of show how these different types of charts are made. First, just a quick disclaimer. I'm assuming that you're able to enter your data and you have some basic ability to input your numbers and your categories into Excel. I'm not going to be going over that topic here. I'll be going over what to do with the data once you have it entered. But if you do need help with that topic, I know there are some other helpful resources out there. LinkedIn Learning, for example, has some great videos on that. American University has some resources on that, and YouTube is always a great resource. So first, I just want to make a simple pie chart. I'll briefly explain the type of data that we're looking at here. These are the distribution of the types of minority-owned farms in Louisiana. I'm currently working on a agricultural research or agricultural conservation project that involves working with minority-owned farmers in Louisiana. So I thought I would use one of these data sets. This is all publicly available data. As you can see, the data source is right here. So as we can see here in this pie chart, we have just a few categories, relatively small number of categories, just 4 here, relatively straightforward. We have four quantities here that together equal a total. I don't have that total on here, but we have a total and then 4 individual components. So it's to create a pie chart or any chart, it's fairly easy. We select our data, and then from here, for those of you who don't have as much Excel experience, the first step is to go to Insert up here at the top. And then here in the middle, we have our charts. This is where we create the vast bulk of our visualizations. We'll go into another tab in a little bit, but this is where most of our visualizations are at. Excel tries to make this easy for you. In fact, it'll offer you recommended charts, and then it can bring up several basic options, pie charts, scatter plots, things like that. I like to generally go to this button right here that is under the recommended charts. This brings up 2 different tabs. We have recommended charts and then all charts. So as you can see here, here's anything and everything you could imagine. We've got column bar charts, line charts, pie charts, a map, a tree map, sunburst. I don't use all of these. So, but in this case, this is a situation where a pie chart would be quite helpful. So it's as easy as this. We've been in here for a grand total of what, 30 seconds, 45 seconds. You click on pie chart, and then from there, Excel gives you all the options for you. In this situation, we've got just a traditional 2-dimensional pie chart. Oh, Philip, I saw your question. This is Excel 365 that I'm using. I have a Microsoft 365 edition, but it's fairly similar in most of the Excel functions. It might vary just a little bit, but it's fairly similar. But anyways, so we have, you can produce a 3D pie chart, or its fun cousin, the donut chart. Well, but in this situation, we're just going to create a fairly simple pie chart to show you how it's done. You click the pie chart, and there you have it. It's right there. You can move it right next to your data, and it's fairly self-explanatory and fairly easy here. It clearly shows the which group tends to own more of those farms in Louisiana. In this case, it would be the yellow category is the Black-owned farms. Obviously, you could make a lot of changes to colors, fonts, whatever you want, but we'll go into more of that in a little bit. I just wanted to show you how you make some of these. And by the way, if anybody wants, I can make these data sets available for you to practice on at some point. I can make those available. I share that with American University when this goes online as well. So another situation is we have a situation with a single bar chart that we can create. This data is actually real data that was produced from a former evaluation that I did. I worked with a nonprofit organization to determine the effectiveness of different types of volunteer activities. And we conducted a survey that asked people what types of volunteer activities they wanted to perform with this organization. And these were the quantities that responded that they wanted to perform certain types of activities. So again, in this situation, it's fairly straightforward. It'll take a minute or less to create our data. Our data visualization tool. We simply select our data here. And again, we go back up to the top here, insert. I like to go back into the all charts format. We have our bar chart. And in this situation, since it's different forms of categories, I think a horizontal bar chart would be very helpful, which is already the option that is selected. Excel tends to have an idea of what is most useful. So, but it tends to identify what it thinks are going to be the helpful charts, but you can always tell it what you think is the correct solution. And again, we just click OK. And here we have our data presented in a clear manner. Again, I think there's a lot that could be done to clean this type of chart up. And in fact, that's something that I did in my previous evaluation reports. We could order it based on largest to greatest, show where people don't want to participate, show where they do want to participate, and then change colors of particular activities that we want to call out. For example, if we thought that more people wanted to do fundraising than others, but for some reason fundraising looked lower than we thought, we could change the color on that. There's so many options that for you to engage in. Another type of chart is the stacked bar chart, where we could create a bar chart that shows different categories broken down by subcategory as well. So this particular data, going back to the example that I'm currently working on with conservation agriculture, this looks at 2021 crop production in 3 Midwestern states, Iowa, Illinois, and Nebraska in 2021 in millions of harvested acres. And again, it's a fairly simple process. We select our data, insert, chart, all chart, go down to our bar chart. And the second option right here is our stacked bar chart, which we talked about. We simply select the bar chart, the stacked bar chart, and there we are able to visually see very quickly. In all 3 states, the blue category, which in this case is corn, is the most prevalent. Excuse me, soybeans are more prevalent in a couple actually, but in this case, hay and haylage tends to be less quantity in each of these 3. So just a simple situation again. The histogram is a little bit more clunky. This one's a little bit different in terms of how you produce it. And I've laid out our steps here. First, we have our data set here. In this situation, we're looking at customer waiting time in seconds, the amount of time that customers spend waiting on a call system. And broken up by number of, each person experience, 43 seconds, 42 seconds, etc. And then we have to create something called our bins when we want to create histogram in Excel. Our bin is basically the width of our x-axis, basically the unit that we want to show along our x-axis to show our scale. So this will make a little bit more sense in a moment. But to do a histogram, you have to actually go to a different spot up at the top here under Home. On the right here, we have this button called Analyze Data. Oh, no. Nope, I'm looking at the wrong. I'm looking at the wrong tool. Sorry, it's under Data Analysis. I got distracted by that for a moment. Sorry, under Data, we want to go to our tab called Data Analysis. And if it's going to pop up for us, for some reason, it's not wanting to pop up. I'm not sure. Oh, here it goes. When Excel cooperates with us, we can select. We have a wide range of number of tools, which a lot of you with more statistical backgrounds than me can have fun in here. But in this case, you select your histogram, click OK, and then we have to input two different areas. First is our input range. Our input range is our actual data set. In that case, we simply go over here and drag around the data that we want to select there for our input range. And then we have our bin range. We select our bin range and go over here and drag over there. And then down here under output options, it's going to select new worksheet fly. We click OK. For some reason, was something not selected? Sorry about that. My Excel seems to be having some anger issues today. Let me try that again. Oh, I forgot to select one additional option. You have to also select this button down here called Chart Output. Sorry about that. And then you click OK here. And here's your histogram. It pulls it up on a different tab here at the bottom. It's a relatively simple histogram that just shows your distribution, showing where the most common the number of wait time was right there in the middle. Looks like a traditional bell chart. So you can use that with other statistical tools. So those of you with more histogram experience, I can definitely use that. I did see in the chat the question about sharing the Excel spreadsheet with participants. Yes, I'd be happy to share the Excel spreadsheet. I'll make sure that's available to everybody. So that's our histogram. Sorry that my Excel was having a few little quirks there. Next, I want to show an example of a scatter plot. So again, a scatter plot is a situation where you present the relationship between two variables. For example, you might want to look at the relationship between per capita GDP, which is basically average income per person, and then maternal mortality rate, which in terms of deaths per 100,000 live births. Some of you might be in the international development world and see data like this that comes from the World Bank and the CIA World Factbook. Creating a scatter plot is just as easy as our other situations. Again, we select our data, we go to Insert, All Charts, and we have our scatter plot. This situation, we only used a few data sets, but again, this is just meant to show how you create it, and it shows there's a relationship between income and mortality rates here, and then of course you'd want to fix your labels, make sure that your axes are clearly labeled, and other things like cleanup that you could think about depending on what you need to present in your data as well. The next chart is a line chart. An example of data would be, in this situation, would be one of my clients' contract win rates. So we write a lot of proposals for our clients when they're trying to bid on federal contracts, for example, and we can trace changes in the amount of contracts that they win as a percentage each year, the number of bids that they pursue. So we just pulled this up. All this is confidential, all that is scrubbed, but here's an example of how win rates can change for clients over years. And again, the situation is as easy as the others. Select our data, insert, go up here, and right away, its recommended chart is a line chart. We can select that right away, and there we show the change in win rate over the years for this particular client. Always nice to see that their win rate is going up over time. Definitely makes a proposal consultant happy to see. And then finally, I just wanted to have a situation, another line chart where you might have multiple lines. We talked a little bit before about how you might want to show different subcategories. In this case, we're looking at test scores, average combined mean SAT scores, broken down by particular ethnic groups within the US, American Indian, Asian, Black, Hispanic, and white. And all this is from a blog online. So again, it's a fairly simple process. We select our data, insert, chart, and as you can see right here, it's created a line chart that presents our data in all 5 of our subcategories broken out in here in one spot. So I wanted to take this opportunity to apply some of the pro tips in Microsoft Excel. How can we take, for example, this chart that we're looking at right now from this default way where it's fine, it shows the data, it's visual, but there are definitely ways we can improve it to make it easier on our audience to read. So we click on our chart itself, and there are several things that we can do to clean this up. I'm sure many of you would have some ideas or ways that we could fix this, but I'll go over a few how I think it could be improved. First, I think the y-axis scale, the y-axis needs to be revised. Right now, it's showing everything from 0. The y-axis is showing our test scores, and the x-axis is showing our time, year from 2018 to 2022. But it's really just a lot of empty white space right now. There were no average test scores, for example, under 800. So we're not really able to see the changes over time as much because it all just kind of looks like it's flat right now. So what we could do is we could select our vertical axis, right-click that axis, and format it. This is where we get some options for how we can play with our axis. Here, I think the bounds are important. The bounds are basically what is your bottom and what is your top. Right here, we have 0 to 1400, which as you can see here is 0, 1400. But there's no need for our bottom bound to necessarily be 0 here. In fact, it would probably be easier if we show it starting at, for example, say, what does it look like? It starts at maybe 800. It looks like there's nothing below 800. Press enter, and right away we can see our data much more clearly. In essence, just changing our bounds allows us to zoom in on the data that we're trying to portray. So now we can make a few other changes. You can make changes to the colors of your charts, for example. Excel likes to make this easy on us. When you select your data in here, one of the line, for example, it brings up 3 different options: chart elements, chart styles, and chart filters. If we go under style, right here, we can go to our color, and it'll give us several default options. For example, if we want to show a gradient of different colors, in Microsoft Excel, there's a function in here, somewhere in here, where you can set up whatever style you want to have, with colors assigned to different styles, and it'll automatically populate that. But sometimes I find that it's almost easier to just go in and change the colors themselves one by one. You can literally do that right. You can literally do that right in here. For example, when you right-click on the line, when you go to outline, you can then bring up the entire color palette. You can choose any of the default colors. For example, this top one, we could do red. I'm not being mindful of accessibility right now, but I'm just choosing colors to show how it's done. So again, we've got this one right now. We right-click it, change the outline color to, say, blue. And then we can change this one to, say, green. Well, we've already got a green one, so I need to change that one to another color. And you can do any color that you want. In fact, if you go to more outline colors, you can go in here and you can literally go anywhere you want. So we can make it bright purple, chartreuse, whatever color you dream of, you can do. Whatever your organization branding or data story that you're trying to say is great. And say, for example, you want to call attention to one of these lines more than the other. For example, you might be worried, oh, it looks like one of these has actually decreased a little bit over time. And say you want to call this one out and make sure that this is what people look at even more. You can change things like thickness. You can change things like you can make them from solid to dashed. There are so many options in terms of what you could actually do. Another thing to think about is the font. When you select your chart, you could, right now it's all Calibri 10. Let's say that your organization uses a different font. I have lots of fonts installed in here. You could change it to whatever you want. Century, for example, not my favorite font in the world. I just selected one at random. Let's do one that was maybe a little bit cleaner. Maybe I'm a big fan of Arial Narrow. It's very clean. It's very condensed. I like Arial Narrow. So we'll go to Arial Narrow, and that changes everything to Arial Narrow. Condensed font, you'd be able to use it in a smaller format. Then, for example, you don't like the fact that it has a border around it. Well, I mean, that's easy to do. We simply right click on this, and we remove our border. No outline. And now we have no border. It'll be nice and clean when it's put into our Word or PowerPoint or wherever it is. And then, as I mentioned previously, you can change the title. Right now, it's just called chart title. That's no fun at all. We can change that very quickly. You literally select it and then change it. I'm going to bold it and make sure that my text is black so it's clear. And we'll call it Figure 1, Test Scores. Oh, if I can type without having typos. And then my best practice is I usually like to do a little bit more of an action caption that's italicized to call home a message. This is just a random title. Test scores tended to change over time, and then you can change over time, and then you can adjust your title as necessary to basically drive home whatever message you're trying to communicate here. And one other thing I wanted to point out is you can then take these graphics and put them into your reporting. I think I saw a question in the chat about, is it better to copy the data into PowerPoint or have them be linked, or better to paste it in it as an image? Wonderful question. Such an important question. If you copy and paste your image, it's not necessarily going to work perfectly. In fact, let me pull up a Word here. I've pasted that graphic and I put it in here, and which in this case worked pretty well, but it won't always. Sometimes a safer bet is to right-click your image and save as picture. You can then save that picture to wherever you want to go. And then that picture will be saved as a JPEG that you can then insert as an image file. So when you go into your Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or whatever and insert your picture, you just find your graphic, which we called right there, and there it is right there. And then it's inserted as a JPEG that you can adjust in size and make sure that you can change how it wraps around your other text, and make sure that it's an integrated part of your visualization tool. So there's one thing I wanted to go back on the stacked bar chart, another tool that I think is very helpful. In this case, situation shows us data based on geographic regions, in this case, Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska. Let's say we wanted to graphically show that as a map. Well, again, Microsoft Excel makes that super easy to do. Select some of your data, go in here, and then you can literally insert it as a map. In that case, it brings up a heat map that shows, for example, corn there's more corn grown in Iowa than Illinois and then Nebraska, which matches up with our data. And again, this just shows a small number of states with this geographic data. But if you have, for example, housing data or income data for every state, you could quickly do this for, you could quickly develop a graphic that shows where incomes are higher, where certain other categories are higher. The options are really limited in Excel. The point that I'm trying to draw home here is that there's a lot of options here for you, and anything and everything is customizable. It doesn't have to just be the default. You can use the options in Excel to tell your story, to be branded with your organization, and to make sure that the message you're trying to convey is communicated adequately, because you're all doing such amazing work with your organizations. You're collecting data, you're trying to make a difference, but it's important that you be able to communicate that data well in a relatively cheap and affordable way. And speaking of cheap, I do want to quickly point out that Microsoft Excel is not free. I have a Microsoft 365 account which isn't free. It's a couple $100 per year, but then that's not always affordable for everybody. Google Sheets is another option that makes it accessible for people, which is a free option. And I have a Google Sheet here that I'd like to share with you really quickly. It's not a one-to-one comparison. Google Sheets is the Google equivalent of Microsoft Excel, but it's not quite the same. So I want to go back to the example of the pie chart. I've placed that same data in here that I placed in Microsoft Excel, and I want to show you how similar it is. So again, we have our data for the pie chart. We go to Insert, Chart. A little different looking, but it pops it right up. It looks a little different, but it's essentially the same type of chart. Then you can come in here on the right here, set up your chart, and then customize. All the options are right here for you. Your chart style, you can select your background color. If you want a black background, I don't know that you'd want to do that, but you can if you want. Or you can have no background at all. You can change your font very easily. You choose the border around your chart. And I tend to like no border just because I think that's a simpler way to do it. But from there, you can change your colors and so many more options as well. I am not a Google Sheets expert. I tend to use Excel much more just because I'm a little bit more old school, and most of my clients use Microsoft Excel. But Sheets is also an option. I know there are other resources on YouTube and elsewhere that can help you if you need help creating resources in there.
We have some questions, Dennis.
Sure.
Okay. One question.
My chat was minimized. I'm sorry.
It's all right. How do you create the bin column for your histogram?
Oh, the bin column. Yes, honestly, good question. As I mentioned before, histograms are not my #1 area of expertise. I was just trying to go a little bit into the basics. Thank you for that question. I appreciate it. Let me go back to the histogram here. The bin ranges are completely customizable based on however you want the scale to be on your histogram. In this case, I simply entered it manually in intervals of 5 seconds. So 5 seconds would be, if we go along our x-axis, we would go 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15, and in intervals of 5. You can adjust that based on whatever your data is. For example, income. If you want to do income ranges, you might do 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, and then it would basically be able to adjust the scale that way on your bin. You do have to enter that manually as a separate column in here, but it's fairly easy. But again, it depends on the data set that you want, and it depends on the scale that you are trying to demonstrate. Again, I'm probably sounding like a broken record, but it's really about sharing your story in a in a quick and way to make your audience, to bring your audience to the message that you're trying to convey.
Thank you. Is it possible to rearrange the bars in a single bar chart to show them from largest to smallest?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. In fact, that was one of the pro tips I mentioned before. So let's go back to our bar chart. This is a fairly simple situation that we can go to. If we go to our data, we can, the data tab in Excel is right here. And under here, we have a sort function. We can sort, oh, it would help if I select everything, sorry. We can sort by type of activity, quantity, based on smallest to largest or largest to smallest. So in this case, that situation, it allowed us to sort from the largest to the smallest. In this case, we can clearly see advocacy advocacy activities were the most desired activities, and then fundraising down here at the bottom was one of the bottom. You can sort alphabetically, you can sort by quantity. There's quite a few different options. I hope that answers that question, but yeah, that's how you would do that. Again, select your data, and again, the key there is to go to sort, and then it allows you to sort by either quantity or type of activity.
And we also had a question, if you could show us again the chart title, how to make the different sizes and fonts.
Oh, sure. So while we're in here, let's take a look at the chart title. So we select our chart itself, and then we select the actual title itself. When you select that, it brings up the box right here for the chart title. And then right here, when you go up to the Home tab, you can select whatever font you want up here. Say, for example, we're going to go back to, let's just do something simple. We'll do Archer Book. I know not all of you have every font, but I'm just using an example. And then you can justify it on the left, and then you can bold it. You can even change the size. If you want the title to be great big, figure 1. And then again, it's just like editing any other font. You select your words, and then you can even change the color. If you want your titles to be orange and underlined in italics, it's completely customizable in Microsoft Excel. So it's however you want to present that. Not exactly how I would always do it, but that's just sort of some random choices right here. So hopefully that helps.
Great, thank you. Michelle, are there any questions from the Facebook Live?
Yeah, I do have one question. So Dennis, do you recall when you showed us like that map that had the different like cities and like states throughout the US?
Yes.
Is there a similar map for like the world?
Yes. So in this situation, Microsoft Excel recognized that the data set was Iowa, Illinois, and Nebraska. And so it automatically popped up a USA map. Let me go to our line chart. Let's see, I'm trying to remember, was it right? Oh, the scatter plot. Let's try selecting this. This is different countries. I haven't tested this data yet, so let's try this. This is an international situation where we have per capita GDP for different countries. Let's try selecting that and go insert maps. Oops. And so right here, it'll pull up an international map. A world map will be popped up. It's might not be the greatest one just because in this situation, but again, certain countries are darker than others to show higher per capita GDP than others. That can be customized, and it would obviously look a lot better if you had more data. If you had more data sets with more detailed data. But yes, as you can see, it will pop up for the world. In this situation, we had countries from several different continents listed here, but yes, you can have a map with different countries as well. There are other tools out there that visualize this data in a powerful way too. Excel isn't the only one. Tableau, Others create very powerful ways, but Excel can at least get you a basic map as well. I don't create very many maps in here, but it is an option for those of you who are fortunate enough to be working in international context. So that's great. I do see a question about removing the background lines from a chart. There are all sorts of options for lines that you want to have removed from a chart. So let's go back to the scatter plot, for example. If you wanted to remove those, the grid lines here, you would simply go to this top option here, which is chart elements, and then remove the grid lines. You can remove the you can even remove the axes if you wanted to. You can add the data labels. You can add the legend. There are so many options here. You can even add the trend line here. There's so many different powerful tools, which again, you could select your chart and then go to this first option, chart elements, which I think is a helpful way to further help clean up some of those options. Removing your grid lines when it makes sense to help remove noise. I think that's a helpful question. Thank you for asking that, Jeremiah. Were there any other questions? I think I've just about expired the time allotted to me. I hope it's a lot that I covered. And if any of you have further questions or you'd like to connect with me, my LinkedIn is available for connections to anybody. I love hearing everybody's unique stories and seeing what everybody's doing. So I'm open to future connections as well if I could be of any help to anybody in the future.
Well, thanks very much, Dennis, for your presentation today. Really appreciate the time you spent with us. I want to hand it over to Shelley Golson-Mickens to provide a short summary and close us out today. So thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Anna and Michelle. And thanks in advance, Shelley, and to everyone that presented today and joined today.
Thank you, Dennis. Basically, I really enjoyed your presentation personally. I'm looking forward to using the valuable information that you shared. But I really wanted to highlight that I appreciated your discussion on the accessibility considerations. This was a learning opportunity for me. I'm looking forward to adjusting my own practices to reflect these considerations. So this was an excellent presentation. Thank you for your time. I also want to thank all of our participants for joining us today. And I want to remind everyone that the recording of materials are going to be available on YouTube for you to revisit as needed, as I intend to do myself. So thank you so much. I hope everybody has a wonderful day.